So how did you get into product management? I can't wait to hear this. I love your background.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I had a nice career as a singer, and I mean, ironically, technically, I still sing. I mean, I'm on the books for a show with Opera Colorado next season. It's a small part, which is fine because I'm local and it can fit neatly into the rest of my professional life. But I got to a point where I just wasn't getting everything that I needed to out of it. Now, I went to college for music. I have a Bachelor of Music in vocal performance. And many of my singer colleagues not only have that, they have master's degrees too. And not a few of them have doctorates, the ones who want to work in academia, the ones who want to teach. And I was well prepared to anticipate that when one is going to be a working opera singer in the US, you're not going to make a lot of money. Like, you're just not, because like, you're working as a self-employed contractor for arts nonprofits. That's the model in the US. And so you're hired on a per project basis. So your income is really whatever stack of 1099s that you end up with at the end of the year, right? So, and I knew that going into it. So like, the money thing was always hard, even when I was doing well. It's always hard for a lot of my colleagues who are doing well, because if you're making more than, say, $50,000 a year as a singer as an opera singer in the US on the nonprofit opera company circuit, you're probably in the top like 5%, top 1% of singers in the US. It's not a lucrative business. So, but then above and beyond that, if it's not just the money thing, but also it's the you're not being used enough, right? Like, you're not being engaged enough, which I was not. And I mean, like, some of my colleagues would say I was one of the more successful people who did what I did in a very, very specific niche. Like, we get super specialized, and we can talk about that some other time. But basically, for my super, super, super specific sub-niche, subspecialty of opera roles, I was probably one of about the top dozen people in the US. But that's not like out of a gigantic pool, but that's to give you an idea. But I still wasn't doing that most of the time. I was really only under contract for with opera companies and orchestras maybe 4 months out of the year, 6 months, maybe 7 if it was a really good year. And there were some years where it was like 9 to 12 months, but those had been sort of receding in the past. And the thing was, it's not just me. Like, the whole US arts industry, nonprofit arts industry, it's in a hard place. It's, on the one hand, it's very robust, and there's tremendous demand. There's a lot of love from audiences for classical music, for symphony orchestras, for operas, for ballet. But it's the money thing is hard because of the funding model and because our middle class have shrunk. And the middle class, ironically, opera is not just for rich people. In fact, the middle class are the ones who are the ticket buyers primarily. So like, you gotta have strong individual giving, from wealthy people for sure, but like, without there being sort of a community desire for an opera company to exist, for them to be able to do their thing, it doesn't happen. And so it wasn't just the money thing, and it wasn't just me not working enough, and it also wasn't just like the whole industry. I mean, like, I just on a basic human level, like, if you start to not feel needed as a person, as a human being, that's a really bad place to be, right? And that's not unique to artists. That is anyone in any profession who starts to feel useless. That is, from a mental health perspective, that is a very dangerous place to be if you're going to be there for a long time. And I sort of saw that coming down the pike, like, before I ran out of work. Like, I was contracted for all kinds of things this year, and I was gonna sort of like find a job in product management while I was still singing, and sort of like use the singing to support me being a full-time job seeker, and then slowly sort of ratchet down the singing a little bit and make it happen. Of course, COVID threw a wrench into everything and just sped up the process. So suddenly I, like many thousands of my opera colleagues in the US, was completely unemployed because, of course, all public performances shut down. But before COVID happened, in early 2018, all of these things were coming to a head for me personally. And I had always thought that if I was going to do anything besides sing, it was probably going to have something to do with computers. I didn't know what, but I've always been a gamer since I was a kid. I've always been somebody who like tinkered with operating systems and like broke DOS on all kinds of occasions and broke Windows because I was like, I'm gonna delete that file and see what happens, you know, like that kind of thing. And I've been tinkering with web design for a very long time, especially like doing a lot of web marketing stuff for myself as a singer. You learn to do that because you're sort of chief cook and bottle washer when you're a singer. Yeah, I sat down with a friend of mine who is also a former singer, who ironically is the chief operating officer of Spire Digital, where I now work, about 2.5 years ago. And I told him what I was thinking, and he was like, yeah, I get it. He's like, I left the business 10 years ago for pretty much all the same reasons. And he's like, here's some ideas, you know, because I told him, I said, I don't think I necessarily want to be a coder. I want to be an engineer, but I know there's something between the CEO and like the engineer. There's gotta be roles in there. Like, who are those people? What is that? And I also told him I have a very strong visual background. I'm a professional photographer and love design in general. And so he was like, I want you to look at product management and I want you to look at UX. And I was like, what is that? And he said, go look it up, you know. He's like, he told me a little bit about it, but he was like, go look it up. And he said, to start, here are 3 people at my company that you should shadow. And so I did. So in early 2018, I shadowed people at Spire Digital. And that really sent me down the rabbit hole. And I was sort of honestly on the fence for about a year and a half about whether or not I wanted to go into product or UX. And that's a whole other story. But basically, yeah, the lure of product, once I figured out like how amazing it can be, that really drew me in. And at some point earlier in 2020, I had one or more conversations with people who were like, you can be whatever blend of product and UX you want to be. You can be a blended product manager, UX researcher, blah, 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 if that's what you love, which I do love. I love that stuff. But they said, for the purposes of getting your first job, you have to simplify your story and you have to find a point of focus. And, you know, if someone, you know, said, choose right now, like, is it going to be UX or product? It was like, okay, well, product, because like, I love UX, but like product is just, it's so much more nebulous and there's so much possibility. There's so many different directions you can go with it. And I love that. I love sort of like, you know, I love big, epic, long science fiction novels, you know, they're like 600 pages long and you have no idea where you're going to end up at the end of that book. That's product management for me. Like, I love that. So that's a long-winded way of saying that is how I ended up in product management.